Hello, my name is Bonnie Messenger, and I will be your guide through this course. Yes, you heard me right. I said guide, not instructor. I'm not a cultural anthropologist, nor am I an organizational culture consultant, but what I am is someone who participated in a 37-year cultural experiment. As we work through this course, I intend to share with you the unique perspectives and insights that I gained during that time, but more about that later. Back to the course. This is a course about creating the foundation for your lean transformation. You can expect 5 units, an introductory unit, and 4 content units. Each unit will consist of a lecture, reflection topics, assignments, and quizzes. At the end, you can apply for PACE credit, and you will be issued a certificate of completion by D'Angelo Advantage. In the introductory unit, we will talk about the definition of organizational culture and about why it should matter to you. The first unit lays the groundwork for the next 3 and will explore the relationship between evolving cultural definitions and organizational growth. In the second unit, you will spend some time understanding your own organizational culture in order to start your lean journey from a known location. Unit 3 will help you identify your cultural strengths and leverage them to get you to where you want to be. And finally, in Unit 4, which is divided into 2 subunits, we will briefly cover some of the proven methods for shaping and sustaining your aspirational culture. Thus, this course is devoted to these objectives. The first is understanding what organizational culture is and why it matters. The second is to understand your current cultural context. The third, to identify your distinctive cultural characteristics and identify your cultural strengths. You will then envision and agree upon where you want to be. And finally, you will make a plan for your organization using proven methods for shaping your organizational culture, one that can sustain all the time and resources that you will be devoting to your lean transformation. I have learned over the years that starting any learning journey needs to start with agreeing on how words will be used and achieving a level of consensus. So, this introductory unit is devoted to understanding what we mean when we talk about organizational culture and why that matters. I will be drawing heavily on the work of Edgar Schein for this course. He's a professor emeritus at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and he's known for his groundbreaking work on organizational culture. I encourage you to take the time to read what he says about corporate culture. While he does not specifically address certain specific industry cultures, his insights into group dynamics in the workplace is well worth the read. He asserts that the definition of culture is this: the culture of a group can now be defined as a pattern of shared basic assumptions that was learned by a group as it solved its problems of external adaptation and internal integration. Thus, it worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. So there you have it. And this is what we will be talking about. You may wonder that we have included a course on culture in a lean methodology program. It may seem that lean, with its focus on value and waste elimination, would be mostly concerned with the application of principles and tools. This is a common misperception. The father of lean, Taiichi Ohno, authored a book about the early days of the Toyota production system. In this book, he states that lean thinking is, quote, what I call a revolution in consciousness, end quote. This consciousness is the foundation, maybe even deeper than that, the substrate on which your lean edifice will be built. So it's important to get it right from the start. To succeed at a lean transformation, you will need to change the way everyone in the organization thinks about work. It's been my experience as well. Let me digress for a moment as I promised to tell you a little bit about myself. I worked at an evolving medical laboratory for nearly 37 years. I was part of an organization that grew from 75 employees to over 3,000. Most of the time, I worked in the quality and process improvement arena, which gave me a close working relationship with many areas of function and many levels of employees. My colleagues have been a diverse group of medical laboratory professionals, from couriers to geneticists and phlebotomists to pathologists. Along with every other employee, I was part of a full facet cultural evolution, and I can affirm that this personal experience gives me a really good baloney filter when it comes to cultural truths. Over the last nearly 4 decades, I've been inside an evolving culture, and the perspective that I gained is the basis for this course. You can think of me as a context guide instead of a content expert. Immersed in this cultural evolution, I learned that an executive team can commit to a management model, but it's the cultural aspects of that commitment that will determine its success or failure. I learned that cultural change is like leading an elephant by its tail. It takes a great deal of time and creativity to get things moving in the right direction. Let's start this exploration of meanings by looking at the three integrated fundamentals comprising a business organization and how they contribute to a lean transformation. They are an organization's culture, its people, and its processes. Behaviors that support the organizational vision arise at the intersection of culture and people. A lean culture will drive the behaviors that make work meaningful and effective. At the intersection of people and process produces work. And in a successful organization, the work is something that people can actually do. It's designed for people. Lean will help you design this kind of work. And finally, at the intersection of process and culture is where value is created, and that value must, of course, be something that someone is willing to pay you to do. This is where your customer affects the culture of your organization. The lean focus on value will elevate it. The crux of all three is the sweet spot, and this is the place where a lean transformation starts. So, lean is three things. It's a paradigm for optimizing value. It's a way of thinking that drives behaviors. And it's the design of work itself. So you can see that without considering what culture brings to the table, your lean effort will lack a complete inner core to direct how work is designed, influence how behaviors are shaped, and in the end, it will fail to create value. Ed Schein says, and I quote, "Culture is a property of a group. Whenever a group has enough common experience, a culture begins to form." End quote. The term organizational culture, however, is relatively new in the business world. For a great discussion of the meaning of the term organizational culture, I recommend the Harvard Business Review article, "What is Organizational Culture and Why Should We Care?" by Michael Watkins. He invited people on LinkedIn to discuss what they thought defined organizational culture, and more than 300 people responded. It turns out that there are many ways to describe culture, and perfect agreement is a long way off. Some people talked about culture as something an organization has, and others as something an organization is. For instance, in the is column, we have behavior patterns, shared language and stories, social construct, attributes that are nuanced and often tenuous. These are the things that are talked about and justified. In the has column, we have traditions and rituals, shared understanding, control systems, aspects that can be managed. These are how things are arranged and accomplished. Notice that the has elements lend themselves to management. They can be changed through mechanistic control systems, while the is elements are fuzzy and elusive. So which is it? Well, as we will see, the answer has to be both. To help you understand culture, let's define these three elements of culture. The superficial elements of culture, also called artifacts, are the organizational silos, dress codes, uniforms, reporting structures, incentives, and hierarchies, both formal and informal. These are the things that an organization has. The value-based elements include mission and vision statements, professional ideals, and communicated expectations. These are the things that are published and talked about, expressed, if you will. These elements fall into both the is and the has-beens. While some of them can be managed with exhortations and slogans, others are only developed through discussion and dialogue. The assumed or tacit elements are the mostly unconscious and unquestioned elements of a culture. These are the elements that most often trip up new employees or leaders trying to change things, and they're the least governable. These are the assumptions that underpin informal lines of authority and unspoken norms. They are the is elements of organizational culture, and mostly they defy well-meaning attempts to control them. So culture, at its heart, is the accumulated and shared thinking, feeling, and perceptions of a group. Be aware that this could apply to any size group, from a global culture to the subcultures within it, all the way down to a simple team unit. These shared points of view are inextricably linked to each other, and they represent a pattern of beliefs that have emerged from a shared set of experiences. It isn't possible to talk about whether a certain culture is right or wrong without considering the composition, purpose, and context of the group. Because understanding these elements is central to what follows, let's spend a few minutes anchoring your understanding of them. To illustrate the first element, the visual one, let's take a look at 3 photos. This photo says customer service. No words necessary. This one says information technology, doesn't it? This one says healthcare. Pause the video for a minute and see if you can articulate for each of these 3 photos why it speaks to you the way that it does. At the artifact level, culture is something you can intuit. While you don't know why you know what you know, you're fairly certain that you can tell what kind of culture you're intended to see. But to get to a deeper understanding of a culture than the first snap judgment might provide, you'll have to look to the next level of culture. No doubt your organization has developed statements that convey to outsiders and to yourself who you are and what you do. These statements are examples of the second cultural element, the articulated or espoused values. For instance, your purpose statement tells your customers what your business was formed to accomplish. Your mission statement is all about how you see yourself serving your customer base, while your vision statement is assertion about who or what you hope to be. Finally, your values statement talks about what you believe. Likely, your organization doesn't publish all of these, but your employees should know them. Here's an example. These are the expressed aspirations of the U.S. healthcare industry at large. They've been used countless times to clarify and align various organizational mission, vision, purpose, and value statements. To fully flesh out these espoused values in your organization, you would want to talk to people within your organization to see if they know them and if they feel that the values are reflected in the culture. You will find, if you spend any time talking to the people who work in your company, that there are both alignment and discrepancies between the visual elements and the spoken elements. These are clues that will eventually allow you to uncover your third cultural element, the undercurrent of your organization. These are the unconscious, taken for granted beliefs, perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. These assumptions start when the business culture is formed, either by the leader or by an associated thought leader. The values are imposed on the existing workforce, and the people who espouse these beliefs are hired or retained by the organization. Let me see if an example will help. I was once asked to assess the cultural undercurrents of one of our laboratory sections, a subculture, if you will. There were many changes happening, and it seemed that the staff were unable to adapt. Morale was low, and the manager suspected that a dysfunctional culture was at the core. I spent some time in the department observing the day-to-day activities, and it seemed to be a high-functioning unit. The relationships between shifts and between benches was cooperative and collegial. There was a shared focus on patient welfare to an extraordinary degree. And when workload was high, the supervisor was on the bench, helping wherever he could. His relationship with his employees seemed responsive and respectful. These visual aspects of the culture didn't align with what I'd been told. I attended staff meetings where management and staff alike espoused the values of teamwork, continual learning, and uncompromising excellence. There seemed to be no misalignment between the two. So I decided to interview at least a third of the employees, including bench staff, administrative staff, technical specialists, and medical directors, to see how they talked about their culture. What I learned was surprising to me. While the staff were uncommonly loyal to their management team and they enthusiastically embraced the espoused values, morale was indeed in the basement. There was a misalignment between the visual and the espoused values and the things that people talked about in private. I found that there was an assumed aspect of the culture that was the intrinsic opposite of the expressed values. In this department, the results of testing were submitted to technical specialists for review and interpretation before the results were posted. One of these specialists was an expert in a field that had very few experts available. Everyone in management believed that they were fortunate indeed to have acquired him. He was, however, a very difficult person, and he required special accommodations just to keep him on board. He treated the other employees badly, so badly, in fact, that they took extraordinary measures to avoid him. Many were in tears after an encounter with him. He created a toxic environment in the department, but he was untouchable. From the manager on down, he created an atmosphere of fear. Fear of an encounter with him and fear of losing their job if they stood up to him. I passed on what I had learned, and that was where my involvement ended, but I watched as valuable employees left and high turnover became a crisis. The unspoken cultural element was that this one toxic employee was valued more than all of the other employees together, including management. This was a very difficult realization for the individuals, and it marginalized their contribution at the most basic level. They felt their extraordinary efforts were not noticed and were not valued, except by their closest coworkers. Thus, they had a very strong team, but collectively, very low self-esteem. The culture in that department could not be changed without confronting and addressing that particular assumption. I hope you're starting to see why understanding your organizational culture matters. Just as a familial culture binds dissimilar individuals, a healthy corporate culture drives collegiality and cohesiveness. An organization's culture determines how engaged its employees are. A survey of 600 U.S. employees in 2015 found that one of the top 3 factors influencing employee engagement was meaningful work. And I think it's safe to assume that workers in other parts of the world are the same. When you think about meaningful work, you have to ask yourself, what's the source of meaningful work? Shared feeling and language and thinking and belief are the things of meaning to humans. Not only do they give their lives meaning, but they give their work meaning. Think about it like this. Any skilled worker can test blood or answer a phone, but a worker who believes, thinks, and feels that their work serves a higher purpose will make sure that that result is accurate and will treat the person on the other end of the line like royalty. The carrier of the ideals and beliefs that make us want to come to work and give our lives and our work meaning is culture. By the end of this course, you will realize that your organizational culture will be the determinant of whether or not your lean transformation will succeed or fail. Another of Edgar Schein's books, The Corporate Culture Survival Guide, is a second resource for understanding organizational culture. A PDF of the book is free at the website listed in your references page, and I encourage you to read it. So this course is not intended to be a blueprint for change. Rather, it will help you appreciate the role that culture plays so that you have a clear understanding of how it can disrupt or strengthen the changes that you will be making. You'll come to realize that the right cultural shift can revolutionize thinking, and this revolution in thinking is what lean is all about. You'll be able to use your understanding to leverage your cultural strengths and to marginalize your cultural constraints. However, should you require a blueprint, there are some resources listed as references for this course. I've read them all, and I think that they have a lot to offer a lean organization. No doubt, as you work to create your own exceptional culture, you'll encounter others, and I'd love to hear from you about what you've found because I'm learning too. Now that we have a common language for talking about culture, we can avoid the missteps that come from being lost in a loop of misunderstanding. We know where we can start a discussion on understanding your own organizational culture. So let's recap. We can agree that lean is a revolution in thinking and that culture is one of three integrated substrates that support a lean revolution. Culture is artifacts, values, and tacit assumptions. These are both is and has elements. Culture matters because it makes work meaningful for the people who do it. A lean revolution in organizational thinking starts with a thoughtful grasp of culture. For your first assignment, I'm asking you to explore your own cultural elements. I want you to first look at your architecture, the decor, how things are arranged. Notice how people behave toward you and toward each other. For instance, are there walls between functional sections or is the area open? Do people with different responsibilities wear different uniforms? Is there an aura of energy or is the atmosphere relaxed? Do people wear business formal or jeans and t-shirts? What's the emotional impact on you when you stand in one place and look around for 3 minutes? Second, I want you to listen to how people talk about their work relationships, about their work, and about the organization as a whole. Are they dispirited? Can they tell you what the organizational purpose, mission, vision, and/or values are? Do they seem fearful of management, of each other, of one particular person? Do they talk about their leaders with respect and admiration, or with angst and mistrust? You may wish to conduct confidential interviews with a sample of the employees within your organization. Be sure to include all management levels and all organizational silos. Is there alignment between the culture you're intended to see and feel and the one that you hear about? Now for the really hard part. Look at these manifestations. Can you see any that reflect and nurture the organizational values? Are there any that seem to be incongruent with the visible and the espoused values? See if you can identify the unconscious elements that drive your culture. Let's use as an example the lab we talked about earlier in this unit. The manifestations of the artifacts were the lab was clean and bright, suggesting that people cared enough about their work to keep it that way. There was a focused energy indicating that people were engaged in their work, they found it meaningful, and people worked really well together. They were helpful, courteous to each other, and loyal. The expressed elements manifested as a group dynamic that spoke of dedication to the patient and dependability. An honest desire for new people to be integrated and effective. Value placed on ongoing learning, job aids, effective work design, responsibility, and even-handedness. These are the elements that were aligned between the visual and the espoused elements. But there was one element that was misaligned. Very low morale was noticed during our one-on-one interviews. So what were the assumed elements? Let's use a lean tool to drill this down, the 5 whys. Why, in an environment of collegiality, dedication, meaningful work, and loyalty, was morale so low? because the visual and espoused elements were not universally expressed in the lab. So why was there this double standard? There was a single employee whose pattern of behavior was tolerated, even though it was misaligned with the desired culture. Why was this one employee deemed excused? Because at the highest level of management, this employee was more valuable than all of the other employees combined. And there we have it. Now let's turn this examination around to a more optimistic assessment. Look for the elements where close alignment are driving the assumptions, attitudes, and behaviors that are your organizational strengths. In the next unit, we're going to be spending some time understanding the relationship between an evolving culture and organizational growth trajectories. Keep in mind what you've learned about the elements of your organization, because this understanding will help you identify and position your own culture on an evolutionary continuum. This is the end of the introductory unit. Take some time to complete the assignment in the quiz, and then return for the first content unit.